Alright, so this is the first video in the GI series. We started with neuro, we worked our way through those systems. Now for GI, I'm going to start a little differently than usual. I usually start off with the anatomy and I go straight down. But I think for this system it's important to talk about all the arteries and the veins, so like the blood flow. I also have a couple of the organs like incorporated. I know it looks a little crazy right now, but we'll get to it. If you watch the previous videos on the musculoskeletal system, you could see like the diagrams I have made of like the different charts for the arteries and then the flow charts for the veins. That's exactly how we're going to do it for the GI. So before we get going, I just want to mention real quick for the GI, this is how we're going to start. The GI, we start off in the mouth. So I'm going to write the mouth. I don't really know how to draw. In the mouth, we proceed down, right? We have two little systems. We're going to have a larynx, which is going to be where our vocal cords are, where we speak. We're going to have a pharynx, okay? And the pharynx is where the food comes down. Now, when we swallow food, we have a little like covering that covers the larynx. We're going to talk about it in a later video, but this is just a basic run through. The pharynx travels down, right? And it turns into the esophagus. And then the esophagus is going to travel down and it's going to become the stomach. So from the stomach, we're going to travel down. We're going to have another thing called the duodenum. The duodenum is the small intestine. It's going to be made up of, well, the small intestine is going to be made of three different regions. The duodenum, the jejunum, and then the ileum, the lowest region, the most inferior. Connecting to the ileum, we're going to have something called the large intestine. So the large intestine, three different regions as well. So the first region is one that's called ascending because it's ascending upwards. It's going to be on the left side, or the right side of the body. Connecting to the ascending colon, or the ascending large intestine, is going to be the appendix. Now, from the ascending colon, or the large intestine, we're going to go transverse. So that means we go right across. This is going to be known as the transverse colon. The transverse colon is going directly across the body, and it's going to descend, or it's going to turn into the descending colon. The descending colon, also known as the descending large intestine, is then going to go into the sigmoid colon. Why is it called sigmoid? It's an S shape. And this is a little disgusting, but it connects to the rectum. This is why when you poo, your feces is S-shaped, because the sigmoid colon, where the feces is stored, is shaped like an S kind of. It's like round. So this is going to be the sigmoid, and then this is going to be the rectum. This is just a quick overview of this huge diagram. I'm going to show like different veins and arteries of the blood flow right now. But to start, we're going to talk about the overall diagram. We're just going to go through a flow chart. Okay, so now, the circulation of the GI and the thorax. What's the thorax? The upper region. Where the chest is, the lungs, heart, etc. So this is the flow chart. Quick diagram. It looks crazy. It's really not as bad as it sounds. We're going to mainly focus on three regions. The three regions we're going to hone in on is the celiac trunk, the superior mesenteric artery, and the inferior mesenteric artery. These are going to be our main three regions. But, just like in all other videos, I go a little extra, so that's what we're going to do. How are we going to start? Okay, so we know blood flow in our body. We start with what? Everything starts off in the heart. I'm going to go from deoxygenated blood into oxygenated blood really quickly. So, if we start off in the right atrium of the heart, the right atrium is where? It's in the top right region. The right atrium receives deoxygenated blood and sends it into the right ventricle. From the right ventricle, blood is going to be carried to the lungs. This is a poor picture of the lungs, but blood is going to be carried to the lungs. From the lungs, it's going to travel into the left atrium. From the left atrium, becomes oxygenated blood, right? The lungs do our gas exchange, carbon dioxide to oxygen. So from the left atrium, we travel into the left ventricle. And from the left ventricle, we're going to travel out into the aorta. So this big blood vessel is our aorta. Now, we know the aorta has a lot of different pathways it could travel. It could have 4 different branches, but the main one we're going to focus on is what happens if the arteries do not branch out. What arteries am I talking about? The subclavian artery that we spoke about in the GI tract. We talked about the arteries that ascend up to the brain, arteries that ascend down, etc. So we're just going to talk about what happens if it doesn't flow down, and we're going to go right into the thoracic aorta. The thoracic aorta is going to be right behind the xiphoid process of our sternum region, right? Traveling through our lungs. Right where the heart, right below the heart, but right by the lungs. So now, the thoracic aorta. It branches off into 6 main arteries. Okay, we're going to start off with the arteries on the right-hand side of me. And these arteries are going to be the bronchial, the esophageal, the mediastinal, and the pericardial. Why these names kind of sound like where they actually go. The bronchial is going to go to the bronchi, so the bronchi of our lungs, where oxygen exchange takes place. The esophageal is going to go to the esophagus, so where we spoke about before, where it swallows the food, or where food travels down. The mediastinal, this is going to be for like lymph nodes, like where our lymph tissues are. And then the pericardial we'll talk about it later on in like further videos, but pericardial is mainly your heart tissue. So we have smooth muscle, skeletal muscle, and cardiac muscle. This tissue surrounding that muscle is pericardial. Okay, now 2 arteries that I have drew on the left-hand side is going to be the posterior intercostal and the superior phrenic. Okay, the posterior intercostal muscle, it's basically going to all the muscles, or posterior intercostal artery rather, is going to all the muscles in between your ribs, so your intercostal muscles. And now your superior and inferior phrenic is going to your phrenic muscles. Now, what do I have here in purple? In purple, I have something known as Marfan syndrome, right? We've spoke about this a lot. What is Marfan syndrome? It's an autosomal dominant mutation. So it's an autosomal dominant disorder. And the mutation is to the fibrillin gene. Fibrillin is a branch or a derivative, right? It gives off elastic connective tissue. Okay, elastic connective tissue is what's in charge of, solely responsible for our valves. Like our heart valves, it's also responsible for our blood vessels, like our arteries, etc. If we have a mutation to this fibrillin gene, it's going to mess up this elastic connective tissue. We're going to result in aortic dissections, aortic aneurysms, or mitral valve prolapses. All of these things are going to lead to significant or severe cardiovascular problems, such as heart attacks, strokes, aneurysms, etc. I know it's a little side note from the arteries, but I thought that was important to talk about. Now, where things get very important. The thoracic aorta then travels down into the abdominal aorta. So right on the belly region, right in your gut. This abdominal aorta branches off into, as you see, all these different arteries. I'm going to talk about the least important ones first, because they're least important. The inferior phrenic, the right and left adrenal. Where does the right and left adrenal go to? The kidneys, we have the adrenal glands right above it. The adrenal glands secrete catecholamines. The catecholamines are epinephrine, norepinephrine, and cortisol. It's our stress response, or flight or fight. We have arteries going to the renal, which is part of the kidney, the gonadal, which is our sex organs, and then the lumbar region. What's the lumbar? Our lumbar vertebrae have lumbar muscles right near them. Now, I'm not saying they're not important, but they're not the major focus of the video. Also, we're going to have the left common iliac artery and the right common iliac artery. The right common iliac artery branches off into the right internal and the right external iliac artery. The left common iliac artery is going to branch down into 2 different regions. So just like the right common iliac, it's going to branch into a left internal iliac and a left external iliac. However, for this side, it's a little different. The left external iliac branches down into 4 different arteries as well. The superior gluteal, which is for our gluteus maximus, our inferior gluteal for our gluteus minimus and medius, the internal pudendal for the pudendal muscles, and then the obturator muscles, right? The obturator foramen, which we spoke about a lot in the musculoskeletal videos. Now, these 2 arteries are, yes, they're very important, but for the main focus of the GI, our main focus is the celiac trunk, the superior mesenteric, and the inferior mesenteric. We're going to start off with the celiac trunk because it's the most superior artery when we're speaking about the abdominal aorta. The celiac trunk is going to branch down into 3 different arteries. It's going to branch down into the gastric, the splenic, and the common hepatic. The gastric artery is responsible for the stomach, right? You have gas in your stomach, a gastric artery. Splenic artery, exactly what it sounds like, it's going to the spleen. Now the common hepatic is a monster. He branched off into a lot of different things. Don't worry, we're going to talk about them again in the diagram, just get a quick note for now. The common hepatic branches off into the gastroduodenal and into the hepatic artery proper. For the gastroduodenal, right, or duodenal, it's going to branch off into two different regions as well. Before it branches, though, it sends blood to the pylorus of the first foot of the small intestine. We mentioned before, the very beginning of the small intestine that comes from the stomach is what? The duodenum. So it's going to basically go to the duodenum. When it branches, however, it goes into the right gastric eploic or the superior pancreatic duodenal artery. The right gastric eploic is going to go to the lesser omentum, which we'll speak about, and then the superior pancreatic duodenal artery is going to go to the pancreas and is also going to go to the duodenum. Now, the hepatic artery proper, where is he going to travel? It's going to travel into 4 different regions as well, unfortunately. It's going to travel into the right gastric artery, which is going to go to the pylorus of the stomach, or the body of the stomach, which we'll get to. It's going to go to the left hepatic artery, which is going to be the liver, or the liver lobule, the left liver lobule, I apologize. The right hepatic artery, which is going to go to the right liver lobule, and then the cystic duct, which is basically going to the gallbladder. Now, the celiac trunk is the main one that we had to focus on. The next 2 aren't that bad, as you can see. Superior mesenteric, 4 regions. Intestinal, which is the duodenum, jejunum, and ileum, the small intestine basically. The ileocolic, which is the cecum, the appendix, and the ileum. The right colic, which is going to be the ascending colon of the large intestine. And the middle colic, which is going to be the transverse colon of the large intestine. Last one, inferior mesenteric. It's going to travel down into the left colic, which is going to be the descending colon of our large intestine. The sigmoidal, which is going to be the sigmoid colon of the large intestine. And then the superior rectal, basically the rectum, branches into the middle rectal or an inferior rectal. So an upper part and a bottom part of the rectum. Now, I know that video or this diagram got out of hand. I'll post a picture of it in the video just so you know it. But just know this is the flow chart. What's more important is understanding on the diagram, which we're going to get to now. Alright, so now we talked about the flow chart. Let's talk about the diagram, right? This is, I know it looks crazy. It's not. All the blue lines, right? If you see all the blue lines, whether it's navy blue, baby like cotton blue, right? Like UNC blue, I guess. Any of these lines, even dark blue, is flowing up as a vein. So all the blue is veins. Now, why do I mention this? Everything that's red, pink, or purple, I probably should have drawn a different color than purple, but whatever. Purple, pink, or red, right? All of these are arteries. Now, did we speak about the veins yet? No. That's going to be the next diagram I have. It's right here, the flow chart for the veins. We're not going to do it yet because we're going to do the arteries first so it doesn't get too confusing. Just know, wherever I bring an artery, a vein's going to come from, obviously. That's why the chart looks nuts. Okay. Also, before I start talking about the arteries, remember, the mouth, right? We have something coming down. I'm not drawing over my structure. I'm sorry. But just think, this is the esophagus, right? You have an upper esophagus and a lower esophagus. What artery is connected to the esophagus? We spoke about it before. It comes from the thoracic aorta. Remember the thoracic aorta? Branches off 7 different arteries. The artery that supplies the esophagus. Chris, do you know it? No? Esophageal. It's the esophageal artery. Okay. The esophageal artery is the one that's coming off the thoracic aorta. Now, the esophagus comes all the way down into the stomach. So this orange structure is going to be the stomach. The stomach, anatomical structure of the stomach has 4 different regions. The cardia, the fundus, the body, and the pylorus. Okay. Where does the stomach feed into? Well, you're like, yo, like this is crazy. Well, just bear with me. The orange structure is going to feed into the green structure. This green structure is the small intestine. The most superior part of it is duodenum. Middle is jejunum. Below it is ileum, right? All the way down here, sorry. Now, the ileum feeds into this black structure, right? This is going to be the large intestine. Right connected to the large intestine at the cecum region, we're going to have the appendix. We'll talk about it more. But the large intestine is then going to have what? It's going to have a ascending region, a transverse region, and then a descending region. The descending region is going to feed into the sigmoidal colon, and then that's going to feed into the rectum. Now, just a couple of structures that are not directly a part of this digestive tract that feces and food and bolus goes through, but they aid in secretion, they aid in absorption, nutrition, filtering out toxins, etc. These are the liver, the main mumbo jumbo, the gallbladder, right here in green, the spleen, in like pumpkin brown, I guess, the pancreas, and then we already spoke about the appendix, but that, and then the mesocolon. The mesocolon, basically, it's not, I wouldn't say it's specifically connected to the large intestine, but it's basically like an anchor. It connects the large intestine to the back anterior wall of the stomach. We'll get there. Now, this abdominal aorta is supposed to be right down Broadway, right? It's supposed to go right down the middle. However, I could not be that artistic. This is as artistic as I got. So I'm going to have the abdominal aorta on the left, and all the blood's going to flow into the organs, and then they're going to flow out into the inferior vena cava. Why the inferior vena cava? The inferior vena cava takes the blood where? That's a really bad heart. I apologize. The heart's doesn't really look like that, but I like drawing it like this. It takes it to the right atrium, into the right ventricle, to the lungs, into the left atrium, down to the left ventricle, out through the thoracic aorta, into the abdominal aorta. From the abdominal aorta, it's going to take us to our next point right here. Abdominal aorta. Now, the three main branches that we spoke about, the celiac trunk, the superior mesenteric artery, and the inferior mesenteric artery. We're going to talk about it from the most superficial to the most inferior. Or not superficial, superior to the most inferior. Celiac trunk, right? Flows down. And remember the flow chart. The flow chart branched into three different regions. What were those three regions? So we had the common hepatic, the splenic, and the gastric. We're going to start with the easiest one first, in my opinion, the splenic. The splenic artery comes from the celiac trunk right to the spleen. The spleen is going to receive it. Now, so the splenic artery right into the spleen. Now, what else did we talk about? The gastric artery. We said the gastric artery goes to the stomach, right? Gastric, gas, like that's how I'm thinking of it. The gastric artery is going to funnel into two different regions of the stomach. It's going to funnel into the pylorus, which is the most inferior region which connects to the duodenum. And it's also going to funnel into the body of the stomach. So as you see in this like purplish color, I guess, it's going to the pylorus and the body of the stomach. Now, what was the big mumbo? The one that was like so crappy. The common hepatic artery. Where did he travel? Okay, he split. Remember, he split. Before we talk about where other places it went, it split into the hepatic proper and the gastroduodenum. We'll talk about the gastroduodenal first. The gastroduodenal went to the right aploic or epiploic, which is where? Right into the omentum, basically. The omentum. And then it also went into the superior pancreatic duodenum. All right, this is really getting confusing, right? The superior pancreatic duodenum goes to the duodenum and to the pancreas. So where does the pancreas secrete its blood from originally? Like the main part of the abdominal aorta, the celiac trunk. We go celiac trunk, common hepatic, gastroduodenal, superior pancreatic duodenal, pancreas. That's a crazy, crazy way to get to the pancreas, but I don't know, that's how God created us. Now, what else do we have? The gastroduodenal also connects into the stomach, mainly the pylorus a little bit. Gives a little bit of anastomosis, not really anastomosis, but like external branches right to the pylorus. Okay, so that's one tract of the common hepatic. The next tract of the common hepatic is going to be the hepatic proper. All right. Hepatic proper isn't too bad. This is the right hepatic and this is the left hepatic. Now, why am I saying this is right and this is left? Look at my body. Anatomical positions like this, right? Left side, right side. This whole diagram is right side of my body, left side of my body. So this is going to be the right hepatic, this is going to be the left hepatic. It would make sense. So the right hepatic doesn't do much, right? basically it goes into the right lobular lobe of the liver. So this is the liver right here. This is like our main organ for the GI, in my opinion. The liver, right? So the right hepatic is going to go into the liver. What else the right hepatic does? Why? Couldn't tell you. It's going to go into the cystic duct. The cystic duct connects to the gallbladder. So we have the right hepatic going into the right lobular lobe of the liver, cystic duct, cutting across, so transverse, into the gallbladder. Cool. The left hepatic duct, he's friendly. All he does is go to the left lobular lobe of the liver. Not too bad. Okay, so the celiac trunk goes to the common hepatic, hepatic proper, left hepatic, left lobular lobe of the liver. Now, remember real quick, common hepatic, you go two ways, hepatic proper, gastroduodenal. Gastroduodenal goes to the right plug, to the omentum. Superior pancreatic duodenal goes to the duodenum or the pancreas. Common hepatic go to hepatic proper, right hepatic, left hepatic, both into the lobes of the liver, or we go through the cystic duct to the gallbladder from the right hepatic. Splenic goes to the spleen, gastric goes to the stomach or the pylorus. Chilling. Now, superior mesenteric artery. 4 main arteries here, not as bad as the celiac trunk. We have the intestinal, the middle colic, the right colic, and the ileocolic. Intestinal, where is it going to travel? It's going to travel down, and it's going to mainly target the small intestine. Which regions? Duodenum, jejunum, ileum. So it's the small intestine artery. The middle colic now, right colic, and ileocolic, they're going to supply our large intestine. So for intestinal, right in here, I'm just going to write small intestine. You know what 3 regions, duodenum, jejunum, ileum. Now, middle colic, right? It's going to travel down and it's going to target our transverse colon, which is the large intestine that goes directly across our body transversely, and the mesocolon, the one that anchors it down. The right colic artery is going to travel down and it's going to target the ascending colon. So the right colic is targeting the ascending colon. The ileocolic is going to target the cecum and the appendix and the ileum. So it's targeting 3 different functions. What is the cecum? The cecum is basically the region that's the most inferior part of the ascending colon that's connected to the ileum. So the cecum absorbs all of the bolus from the small intestine, or from the ileum in particular. So the cecum, appendix, and ileum all get their blood supply from ileocolic artery. Now, how do we supply the left side of the large intestine? I'll show you. Inferior mesenteric artery. You see how I have it traveling all the way across? Inferior mesenteric, inferior mesenteric, right? Branches into a couple regions, not too bad. It branches into the left colic, the sigmoidal, and the superior rectal. The left colic is going to supply the left colic region. What does colic even mean? Colon, large intestine. Left side, gotta be descending, right? The right side is ascending. Middle is transverse. Left side is descending. So left colic has to be descending. Sigmoidal is going to travel into what? The region where I said like feces is like shaped, like formed. I don't know. The sigmoidal is going to be that S-shaped part. So the most inferior region of the descending colon. And then the superior rectal is going to go to the middle and inferior rectal, which basically supplies the rectum. That's how we get blood supply to the whole entire GI tract. Now, just because we have blood supply going to the GI tract, how do we get blood supply away from the GI tract? Everything in blue. Okay, so in the last video, I spoke about the arteries, how everything flowed into the GI system. Now we're just going to speak about the veins, how everything flows out of the GI system. We start in the abdominal aorta. We're going to finish in the inferior vena cava. Really, it's really not like the arteries. It's not that bad. The arteries suck. The veins are, the end goal, honestly, yes, it's the inferior vena cava, but just really, like a really important thing to know, the end goal for these veins is in the liver. So all of the blood from the GI is mainly going to flow through the liver into the inferior vena cava. Why? Why do we think this? So the liver has so many different functions with bile, transporting lipids, fats, cholesterol. It has all our detoxes, right? Like drinking alcohol, drugs, etc. It helps filter everything out. Yes, other organs help do it too, but the end goal is going to go through the liver, out through the inferior vena cava. We're going to speak about the flow chart first, and then from the flow chart, we'll get back into the diagram real quick. Okay, so now, I apologize. Last video, I should have mentioned that the arteries for the GI, we're going to have it flowing down, right, in our diagrams. The veins, we're going to have them flowing up. Why? The heart, right here, right, sends blood. Yes, it sends blood up, but not mainly, but for the GI, it's sending blood down, right? So the arteries are going to descend down. When pressure builds up, right, and as blood flows, because you know it's a circuit, our circulatory system is a circuit. Circulatory, circuit, Latin roots, right? Going to push the blood back up. How does blood go back up? Veins, valves, etc. This is not a blood video, just wanted to mention that real quick. Now, I'm going to start from the bottom, and I'm going to go to the top now. The last video, I started from the top and went to the bottom. 3 main things I want us to know, though, before I start. The end goal is the inferior vena cava, right? And then we said the liver, basically, right? So it goes from somewhere to the liver to the inferior vena cava. The main important thing from the liver is the hepatic portal vein. So this is the vein that's going through the liver. Now, 2 main things feed into this hepatic portal vein. The superior mesenteric vein and the inferior mesenteric vein. Does this sound familiar? It should. It's exactly like the superior mesenteric artery and the inferior mesenteric artery from the abdominal aorta. Now, what flows into the superior mesenteric vein? We're going to have the right colic vein, which is going to be the ascending colon. We're going to have the middle colic vein, which is the transverse colon. The ileocolic, which is the ileum and the cecum. The intestinal, which is the jejunum, the ileum, and the small intestine. The gastro-omental, which is going to be the gastric system, and the greater and lesser omentum. And then the pancreatic duodenum, the pancreas and the duodenum. If you guys think about it, all of these different areas are the same areas that the superior mesenteric artery supplied. So the superior mesenteric artery supplied these regions, the superior mesenteric vein receives it. Sends it up into the hepatic portal vein. Inferior mesenteric vein receives blood from the left colic, the sigmoid, and the superior rectal. What's the left colic? We said it's on the left side of my body, so it's the descending large intestine. Sigmoid is the sigmoid colon right by the rectum, and superior rectal, which is what? Middle rectum, or middle rectal and inferior rectal arteries. It just takes the blood from this region. What else? Then it goes to the inferior mesenteric into the hepatic portal vein. What else sends blood into the hepatic portal vein? The cystic vein and the gastric vein. The cystic vein comes from the gallbladder. We spoke about the gallbladder before. Speak about it again. The gastric vein takes blood from the stomach into the hepatic portal vein. Main one, asterisk, right? Most blood. The spleen sends blood into the hepatic portal vein from the splenic vein. The pancreatic is the pancreas. And then the gastroepiploic, we spoke about this one before. It's the pylorus and the body of the stomach. So it's going to take the blood from the body and pylorus of the stomach, right, the epiploic, and also from the omentum, I apologize. So it's the omentum, the gastroepiploic, into the hepatic portal vein. This is going to send blood up into the liver, into the inferior vena cava. That's the flow chart. We're going to get into the diagram right now. Now the veins leaving the GI, right? Our end goal is the inferior vena cava. What did I say? Where is everything going to travel through for this system? It's going to travel through the liver. What is the vein? It's the hepatic portal vein. So all of these organs, right? All these arteries and blood supply that went to the organs are going to go through veins and eventually end up in the hepatic portal vein, which is then going to go to the inferior vena cava, up into the right atrium, down into the right ventricle, up into the down to the lungs, left atrium, left ventricle, back to the aorta, back to our main guy. All right, thoracic aorta, abdominal aorta. Irrelevant. Now, hepatic portal vein. It's receiving blood from where? The superior mesenteric vein. So this one. We're going to have the inferior mesenteric vein. And then we're gonna have 4 or 5, I'm pretty sure 5 different like excess structures, right? Accessory ones. We're gonna talk about superior mesenteric first. The first one it's gonna get from supply is gonna be the right colic. The right colic, we said, takes blood from the ascending colon. The ascending colon is what? The large intestine, right? The first part of the large intestine. So it's gonna take blood up into the superior mesenteric vein. The next one is the middle colic. The middle colic is gonna supply where? The transverse colon. It's gonna receive blood from the transverse colon, send it up into the superior mesenteric. Number 3 is the ileocolic vein. The ileocolic vein comes from the ileocecal, or the ileocolic right over here, where the ileum is, mainly the ileocecal valve. If we know our anatomy, the ileum into the cecum is ileocecal. So it's going to take blood from the cecum and the ileum, bring the blood up into the superior mesenteric. The intestinal one. What is the intestinal artery? Small intestine. So it was the duodenum, jejunum, and ileum. Where do you think the veins are going to come from? You know it. It's going to come from the duodenum, jejunum, and ileum, sends it to the intestinal vein, up into the superior mesenteric. Gastroomental is next. Where do we think this one's coming from? It's coming from the omentum and the stomach. So we're going to take the blood from the omentum and the stomach into the superior mesenteric. Almost done. Pancreatic duodenal. What's the superior pancreatic duodenal artery? What does it supply blood to? The duodenum and the pancreas. So where is the vein going to get blood from? The duodenum and the pancreas, up into the pancreatic duodenal vein, into the superior mesenteric vein, into the hepatic portal vein. Boom. That's superior mesenteric. Inferior mesenteric, not too bad. I have it right here in like this cotton candy blue, I guess, right? The first one is going to be the left colic. Left colic, colon, right? Large intestine, left side is descending. So it's going to get it from the descending large intestine into the inferior mesenteric. It's going to get it from the sigmoid colon, which is the same as the sigmoid artery, connects to the sigmoid region, sends the blood up. And then it's going to get it from the superior rectal, right? The superior rectal artery goes middle rectal to inferior rectal into the rectum. The superior, I apologize, superior rectal vein takes that blood, sends it into the inferior mesenteric. Inferior mesenteric brings the blood, pulls it into the hepatic portal vein, which then is going to eventually send it all to the inferior vena cava. What's the couple accessory ones, right? First one we're going to do is cystic. So now, I erased superior mesenteric and I replaced it with hepatic portal vein. I couldn't fit everything into the diagram. So just think this is going to be superior mesenteric when we're talking about the royal blue. But when we're talking about navy blue, this is the hepatic portal vein. It's really not that big of a deal because the end goal is the same. Now, the first one we're going to talk about is the cystic duct. The cystic duct does what? What is the cystic artery? It comes from the celiac trunk to the common hepatic artery, hepatic proper, to the right hepatic artery, to the cystic duct, into the gallbladder. The gallbladder, right? Blood from the gallbladder is going to go into the hepatic portal vein via the cystic vein. Cystic vein takes it to the hepatic portal vein through the liver and out. Gastric is the next one. The gastric artery is or the gastric vein is going to take blood from the stomach, right? Just like the gastroomental, we're going to have a gastro. I'm going to draw like that. The gastric is going to come from the stomach and it's going to send blood into the hepatic portal vein. Now, another one we're going to have is splenic. Splenic is the main one. Splenic is going to take blood from the spleen and it's going to send it into the hepatic portal vein as well. The pancreatic vein is going to take blood from the pancreas and it's going to also send it to the hepatic portal vein. Last one I want to mention is the gastroepicloic. Where is this going to take blood from? It's going to take blood from the stomach and it's going to also take blood from the omentum region and it's going to send this blood up into the hepatic portal vein. From the hepatic portal vein, we're going to travel from the liver into the inferior vena cava. Now, no, always the end goal is the hepatic portal vein. I just had to draw it in for the sake of the video. But no, mainly all the royal blue is the superior mesenteric vein. Okay, so I know that video got a little out of hand, a little crazy. But that's all I could have done for blood supply of the GI. And yeah, I hope it helped. All right, so now for some questions. A 59-year-old man is brought to the emergency department with a penetrating stab wound to the chest. The patient is hypotensive and requires large amounts of intravenous fluids, blood replacement therapy, and vasopressors. CT of the abdomen shows no intestinal perforation. The next day, the patient becomes acidotic and reports left side of abdominal pain. So this is the first thing of importance. Not the first thing, but a main thing we should look at. Okay. Physical examination reveals left side of the abdominal tenderness and bright red blood on rectal examination. Okay, so what is important about this? So bright red, we know it's going to come from the lower part of our GI, and dark red would come from a higher region of our GI. Why? Just because this is the way how blood flows down. If it's higher up by like the duodenum and jejunum, the blood is traveling further and becomes darker. And then if it's lower down, it's just new blood basically, so it's bright red. That's how I'm thinking of it, or when I'm answering questions, that's how I'm going to think of it. So now it says bright red blood on the rectal exam, and it's on the left side. Okay, so if we draw a quick little esophagus, draw a stomach here, duodenum, jejunum, ileum, right? No, not the best drawing, but the best I could do. Then we're going to make the large intestine red. So that's ascending colon. Here's our transverse. Here's our descending colon. Here's the sigmoid. Okay, and then here's going to be our rectum. Okay, so now, what does it say? Injury to which of the following locations is most likely causing the patient's abdominal pain and hemorrhage? Well, cecum is located where? It's in the ascending part of the large intestine. And this is the right side, right? If we're looking at our body, this is going to be the right and this is going to be the left side. So the cecum is going to be in the right side, so that's going to be wrong. Okay, so what about the hepatic right colic flexure of the large intestine? Well, it already says right colic, so it's going to be on the right side of the colon, so that's obviously not going to be correct, so that's going to be wrong. The ileum? Well, the ileum is potentially, right? Where is the ileum located? We have, I'll do it in green. Well, we have the jejunum. No. I apologize. We have the duodenum, which is in this region. The jejunum. And then the ileum, which is connecting into the large intestine, right? Into the ileocecal valve. Cecum, ileum, ileocecal valve. And this is going to be on the right side of the body, so ileum is going to be wrong. Now we have two answers. We have the splenic left colic flexure of the large intestine, which it already says left, so this is potential. It's on the left side. And then we have the stomach. Okay, so what did we say? The blood is bright red. So if it's bright red blood, we're going to probably see it in the lower part of our GI tract. And if it's dark red, we're going to be in the upper region. So the stomach, I'm thinking, is going to be dark red. And then bright red is going to be down lower into the descending colon of the GI. So where it says the splenic left colic flexure of the large intestine. So D is going to be our answer here. Okay, a 7-year-old male is brought to the emergency department because of vomiting and painless bright red stools. We said bright red stools were from the lower GI tract, right? And dark red was from upper GI for the most part. He is diagnosed with intussusception and treated appropriately with resolution of his symptoms. So whatever the treatment was, so the RX, treated his problem, so it helped him. Okay. However, the physician is concerned for recurrence, so they don't want it to occur again. A radiotracer uptake scan of the small intestine is performed, and the results appear as shown in the photograph. Okay, so this is where the problem is. Which of the following arteries supplies the tissue most likely revealed by this patient's scan? Okay, so what do we know here? So we know that they have bright red stools, and we said it's in the small intestine. Okay, and then if we can't read the photograph, it's not the end of the world because we know its arteries coming from the small intestine. So if we draw the esophagus, stomach, right, a duodenum, jejunum, and an ileum. This is the small intestine from here to here. Okay, and it's broken up into 3 regions, and blood supply mainly comes from one region in particular, which we spoke about before, and this comes from the superior mesenteric artery. But before we even go through the answer choices, let's just talk about it. Superior mesenteric branches off into 3 different regions, right? The 3 different regions are the intestinal. 4 different regions, I apologize. Intestinal, middle colic, right colic, and then the ileocolic. Okay, and then what is the main one here? Well, the intestinal. It supplies blood to the 3 regions of the small intestine. So superior mesenteric artery has to be our answer here. Where would the left gastric artery go to? Well, this is the stomach, so that's not the small intestine. The inferior mesenteric artery goes to the descending colon, right? It goes to the left colic, it goes to the sigmoidal, it goes to the superior rectal, which is for the rectum. Well, that's not the small intestine. The gastroepiploic goes to the omentum and to the gastric, so the stomach again, so that's not the answer. And then the celiac artery, right? This is the main one that goes up to the liver, it goes to the stomach, it goes to the spleen, it goes to many, many different regions. It does have a branch, right? Known as the superior pancreatic duodenal branch, which goes to the duodenum and the pancreas, which would be part of the small intestine, but I'm looking for the answer that has all the small intestine arteries. So E is going to be my answer.